And this morning's presentation is going to be a mix of slide presentations as well as hands-on. It's mostly going to be hands-on. I will have some slides, however, to go through some basic information and provide other information as necessary. Basically, the agenda that we're going to be going over is a client overview, which is an overview of the various InduSoft clients that we offer that support your users, both web, secure viewer, and what we call our mobile access clients. We're going to be talking about and showing how do you configure InduSoft to support the web-based clients. Talk about and demonstrate how you configure and set up security in such a way that IIS can be used to support your web-based clients. Talk about some considerations that you need to think about on the client side, i.e. wherever the browser or the client application is going to be running. And then spend a fair amount of time talking about issues and troubleshooting techniques. And although this is at the bottom of the slide, it'll actually be mixed in as we go through the presentation and we go through the webinar. I will highlight areas and actually demonstrate some typical errors that your users might find or you might have, and ways to get around those. Again, my name is Larry Combs with InduSoft. So let's talk about the various clients that we offer. InduSoft offers 4 different clients, 2 share the same name, called Mobile Access. The WebThin client allows users to access an InduSoft project from an Internet Explorer browser running on a Windows operating system. So if you have users who typically run in Windows and they want to launch a browser to connect to the project on some machine running InduSoft, then that's a great option for them. The Secure Viewer Thin client is another option that is a client that you can download onto your desktop or laptop. It provides the exact same user experience as the user sitting in front of the actual InduSoft machine. Now, the WebThin client and the Secure Viewer Thin client give the user sort of full functionality to InduSoft. Everything you build in InduSoft, the screens, the graphics, all are fully available and rendered on those 2 clients. And then we have another type of client, which we call the Mobile Access client, which is designed for mobile devices. There's actually 2 versions of those. The Mobile Access Thin client, which is a graphical client interface using the HTML5 language, and then we have a Mobile Access Thin client we call the Tabular client, which is a pure textual client that can be used on mobile devices that don't have a full functional browser. So the WebThin client, I talked about this. It basically runs within a browser, supports any Windows operating system. Does require Internet Explorer and provides the full functionality of the InduSoft project inside your browser. You have the Secure Viewer Thin client. The Secure Viewer Thin client, again, provides a full functional capability. The difference between it and a browser is it provides the exact same user experience as the user sitting in front of the machine. So if you wanted to lock your users out of doing things like getting to the Windows menu or task switching, and all you want to do is let them run your InduSoft project, then the Secure Viewer is a potentially good option for you. Again, that runs on Windows operating systems and provides the full functionality of InduSoft. Then we have the 2 Mobile Access clients. The Graphical Mobile Access client provides a graphical user experience for users running on any browser that supports the HTML5 language or protocol. It is built using a bunch of widgets that we make available to you, And we will go through this and show you how to set that up, and again talk about some issues or things that you might want to consider when using this one. And then we have the Mobile Access Tabular, or what we traditionally have called the Studio Mobile Access. That's what the SMA stands for. And it provides a very simple textual-based interface. So for devices that might not have a full functional HTML5 browser, this is a good option that you can provide to your users, and they get basic functionality for monitoring and changing tag data, as well as monitoring and acknowledging alarms. In a deployment scenario, you might use all of these or any of these clients to talk to various InduSoft Web Studio servers that are on your premise, maybe in the cloud, maybe on some other network or some other configuration that you might provide to them. A typical deployment might look something like this. You have a server running a web server and InduSoft is what we call the data server. So when we talk about the client interfaces of InduSoft, we're basically talking about the web server, which serves up all the application files that are required by the project, things like screens, tags, any global procedures, procedure files you might have created. And then we have the data server, which is basically the InduSoft runtime, and it is providing the online history information, tag values, trend history, alarms, etc. And the end user client application running on your desktop or laptop is using that information to render the graphics on the client itself. The web server can be any web server that can serve up web pages, basically. IIS, Apache. Typically, they'll use port 80. If you use encrypted communications, it might use port 443. The InduSoft data server, by default, uses port number 1234. We'll talk about how you might change these if you want. And the clients communicate with the web server and data server to run the client application. A alternative, or a less typical, but we see it often, is an application where you have your end users on the other side of a firewall. You might have InduSoft running on some machine, and you have clients on the inside who need to access it, but you also have clients on the outside that need to access. One of the typical scenarios for doing this is something called port forwarding, which is it's basically a router technology which allows you to forward traffic from your public internet interface to an internal interface, and then route that to any specific machine. So if you have a public IP address and someone connects to port 80, then you can configure the firewall to allow that port 80 traffic to go to the web server supporting InduSoft. Likewise, if you have a public IP address and people try to connect to that on port 1234, then you can configure the router to direct that traffic to the InduSoft machine on port 1234. So this is a typical thing that we see for people who have this application, and this is the most common way that people solve that particular problem. A less common way is something we call the web tunneling gateway. And the web tunneling gateway basically is for those customers who cannot, for whatever reason, push traffic on port 1234 through their firewall. Some people have their firewalls locked down. Some people have IT organizations which only allow you to have port 80 or port 443 traffic. And if you either work or support one of those organizations, then this is a solution for you. It basically takes all of the traffic coming from the client application and puts it across one connection to the web server, and all the connection will be on port 80 or port 443. So we're basically going to encapsulate the port 1234 traffic and deliver it on the same interface. Once the web server gets that, it's going to pass it through something we call the web tunneling gateway. The web tunneling gateway will basically split the web traffic from the data server traffic. The web server traffic will go back through the web server and do what it would normally do, and the data server traffic will be forwarded to the InduSoft runtime application to be processed, and then data goes back to the client the exact same way. So let's talk about how you could actually configure InduSoft. So give me a moment here to actually start InduSoft. When InduSoft first launches, as many of you may know, it launches something called the PC Demo application. If you have not spent time in the PC Demo, I would encourage you to do so. It has some great examples of the types of things you can do with InduSoft. But I'm going to create my own InduSoft project real quickly. And I'm going to create a fairly simple screen. And we're just going to stick a button on it, call that button exit, give it a command that shuts down the project. So a very simple application, one screen. You may have applications that have a handful of screens. You may have applications that have hundreds of screens. From a local interface perspective, the person sitting in front of the InduSoft application, when they run it, will be able to see these screens, be able to navigate through the screens given the controls that you give them. But what we want to do is we want to provide a user experience to people who are not in front of the machine, who are using some client-based application. And to do that, first thing we need to do is actually save this screen. I'll call it main. And once you've created a screen in InduSoft, if you want to make that screen available to your web users, you need to publish it. So to publish the screen, if the screen is open, I can click on the application icon in the upper left, select Publish, and then pick Save as HTML. And what that will do is it will take my screen and save it as HTML. But first it's going to tell me that there's something called this TCP/IP server module that needs to be enabled. And do I want to enable that? So what is that? So I'm going to say no. And I'm going to go to the Home tab of InduSoft and click Tasks. So if you've been around InduSoft for a while, you probably know there's a bunch of tasks that InduSoft runs when your project runs. Background task does things like alarming and trends. The core runtime manages things like the tag database and the new drivers, OPC, etc. Well, one of the tasks is something we call the TCP/IP server runtime. The TCP/IP server runtime is the task that supports client communications. Now, don't confuse it with the TCP/IP client runtime. The TCP/IP client runtime is a task that allows this copy of InduSoft to talk to and be a client to another copy of InduSoft. Okay, what we want to do is we want to be a server. We want to accept client connections. So I can select the TCP/IP server runtime, and I can select Startup, change it to automatic, click OK, and now when I start my project, the TCP/IP server runtime will start. Now, had I just said OK or yes to that previous pop-up, it would have done the same thing for me. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that this is the task and how to configure it if you wanted to configure it or turn it on and off. You would do it in the tasks process of InduSoft. So I'll go back and publish this again, save as HTML, and I get an additional menu here, or additional pop-up here, just giving me some information about if I want to increase security, and we're going to talk about this, so I'm just going to skip past this. We're going to go through all the web settings. And now what it has just done for me is it's converted my screen into an HTML file that I can access from a browser. Okay. Now, in order to access that screen from a browser, I need to be able to have a browser connecting to some web server somewhere. And since InduSoft runs on a Microsoft platform, the web server that we use is typically IIS. And you can use other web servers if you want. For the purposes of this webinar, we're going to talk about IIS. If you have some questions about other web servers, then post them to the chat, and we can maybe address some of those. If you have very specific questions, configuring a web server is an IT operations task. I would have you consult with your IT group. You can talk to us, and we can give you some hints about what to use if you want to use something else. But in this webinar, and in what most of our customers use, is IIS. So now that I've published my screen, I want to go in and configure IIS. So to configure IIS, the first thing I need to do is to make sure that IIS is actually installed. There's two places to find out if InduSoft is installed. You can open up the control panel on your machine, go to Administrative Tools, and if you find the Internet Information Services Manager, then you know that IIS is installed. Alternatively, you can go back to the control panel. You can go to Programs and Features, or Add Remove Programs in Windows XP, and you can go to the option called Turn Windows Features On or Off, or I think in Windows XP it's Add Windows Components. And you will get a list of the features that are available. And one of those features will be called the Internet Information Services. So if this is turned off, then what you want to do is you want to turn it on. And if you just select the little box, it'll turn blue because it's going to select the default settings for you. And then what we want to do is we want to go and accept the defaults if all we're going to do is host a WebThin client or a secure viewer. But if we think we're going to host the mobile access client, there's one more thing we need to do, which is to go to the World Wide Web Services, to go to the Application Development Features, and turn on these options that are selected. Okay. Normally the default options are, these options are not selected. Okay, so had I really not had IIS installed, then these options would be unselected, and I would have to come and select them. Now, to run the mobile access tabular, you need to select ASP because it uses ASP. Notice it also turns on the ISAPI extensions. If you want to run the mobile access, the graphical client, you want to select ASP.NET, which will turn on .NET and ISAPI filters extensions. If you don't know that you're going to run those, you can just leave these blank and come back later, or you can turn these on, and if you never use them, they're not going to hurt anything. So my recommendation is when you configure IIS, take the defaults, select these options, and then if you decide to use things later, you'll be done. You won't have to worry about, oh, did I turn these on, or I'm getting a specific error, why. So just turn these on when you configure IIS, and if you use them, great. If you don't, they're not going to hurt anything. So that'll take a few minutes. So that's why I didn't actually go through the motions here. Didn't take up a lot of white space on the webinar, just letting that finish. So my IIS is already installed, so I need to open the Internet Information Services Manager. And if I expand the connections tree over here on the left-hand side, I will get my machine name, and then I'll get application pools and something called sites. And if I expand sites, I will get something called the default website. When you configure InduSoft or IIS for InduSoft, our recommendation is to use the default website. You do not have to. You can create your own website. You might have a host that has multiple websites already running, and you need to configure those websites, or you need to configure a new website for InduSoft. If you need to do that, then you would right-click on Sites, and you would just pick Add Website, and go through some of the same motions that I'm going to go through here. But you do need to consult with the people that are responsible for those other websites, because they may have done things to the web server that that you might need to know about, like setting up various permissions or security. So our recommendation, and what most customers do, is they run InduSoft on a dedicated machine, and therefore IIS is not already running some other website. So the default website is suitable for using with InduSoft, and that's what our recommendation is. But if you want to create another website, or you need to, then you can do that. If you need help doing that, again, that's an IT operations task. Consult with your IT group on how to create a new website. Once the website is created, we need to do two things. We need to tell the website where InduSoft is. And the way we do that is we come over here and click the basic settings on the far right under Actions, and we will get a little pop-up window where we can define something called the physical path. And the physical path is basically going to be the location that the web server is going to use to search for web files when a user connects using some browser. The default location is c:9netpub www root. What we want to do is we want to change this location to be our path of our InduSoft project. So I'm going to just pick the ... button, and I'm going to browse for my projects. Now, the InduSoft default installation folder is called InduSoft Web Studio version 7.1 projects. If you don't know where your project is, you can go back and open InduSoft. You can go to your project information, and it will show you where the path is of your project. So if you don't know or you don't remember, this is where you can go find out. But what we want to do is we want to have InduSoft, or you want to have the IIS server pointing to that folder. Now, you have two options. You can either have it point to the project folder, or you can have it point to the web folder. Much of our documentation talks about having InduSoft point to the web folder. And if you only have web clients, either the WebThin client or the mobile access client, then publishing the web folder as your physical path is great. But if you have secure viewers, then you need to publish the project path instead. Okay, so my recommendation is publish the project path, and for the same reason I suggest you turn on all the ASP and ASP.NET options when you install IIS, is if you publish the project path and you start using web clients and later you move to secure viewers, you don't have to change anything. It's just going to work. So my recommendation is publish the project path and click OK. So now my physical path points to my InduSoft project folder, and I'm done. Okay, setting up the physical path. All the other things you can leave as options. The second thing we need to do when we configure InduSoft or configure IIS for InduSoft is define what are called MIME types. Okay. MIME types started out as a technology for email, such that when you send email attachments around, the attachment is tagged so that the email client knows that it's an Excel file or a Word file or a PowerPoint or something. MIME types started to be used by web browsers several years ago, and in Microsoft's case, if you want to serve up a file on a web browser, and that file has an extension like a .html or a .xml or a .text or anything like that, a MIME type needs to be defined for that file type. If you want to know what MIME types InduSoft supports, and you will want to know that, you can go to the technical reference, or what we call the help manual. So if you go back to InduSoft and open the help manual, you will find a number of bits of documentation about how to basically do what we're doing today. But under the building sample application, what I want to open this for is a list of all the various MIME types or extensions that InduSoft uses when creating or managing a project. There's the .app extension, which is the extension we actually use for the project file. There's bin, CSV, GIS extensions, HTML, a whole bunch of different extensions that we use when we host InduSoft or we use or develop InduSoft applications. So what you need to do is you need to create MIME types for every one of these extensions. Now, some of them will already be created, like CSV and bin and text, but things like .app, .scc, okay, .gis, those extensions will not automatically be created, and you'll need to create those in order for your InduSoft application to actually work. So in Internet Explorer, or I'm sorry, Internet Information Services, we need to open the MIME types. And in addition to all the different MIME types that are already here, and you can see there's hundreds, we want to add those used for InduSoft. So over on the far right, you pick Add under Actions, and you add the file extension like app, and then you define a MIME type. Okay, our recommendation is to use Application Studio. Excuse me. But in reality, it doesn't really matter what you put here as long as the syntax is correct. So if you want to call yours Application Project or Project InduSoft, all of those will work. There just has to be something here so that the Internet Information Services application, when it starts, will actually serve up your file. So we need to repeat this process for all the different extensions that we support. Or what you can do, and I would recommend this for test environments. If you don't want to go through the 14 or so extensions that InduSoft requires, you can create a wildcard which will match any extension that's not already defined. So again, for test deployments or for things like this, where I'm not going to sit and take your time typing in 14 different extensions, you can use a wildcard which will match any extension that's not already defined. You could also use this, if you have a production environment that is, well controlled, isolated from other applications, not being shared by other web services, then you might consider using the ** extension as well. But you have to do one or the other. Either define all the different MIME extensions we use, or the one that InduSoft, or the wildcard like I've done here. So when you create these extensions, you see they get added to the list, the .star, the .app, the .scc, and once the web server gets a request for one of these files, it'll say, oh, I know what this file is, and it'll give it and serve it up to the browser. Okay, if you don't do this, you're going to get some errors, and we'll actually look at what some of those errors look like in a little bit. So once you've done those two things, once you've set the physical path and defined the MIME types, the next thing you want to do is you want to restart your website. You can either right-click on the website And under Manage, pick Restart. Or under Actions on the far right, you can pick Restart, or you can pick Stop and Start, whatever makes it work for you. Sorry, excuse me. And that will now make all of the changes we made active. Now, alternatively, you can pick your host name, and you can restart all of IIS. Okay? I always do both because I am always on the conservative side. But you can do either or, but you do need to restart the website after you make any changes. So, for example, if you missed a MIME type and you need to come back and add it, make sure you restart the web server or your website after you make that change, or it's not going to be active. You're still going to get the same sort of errors. So IIS configuration is done for now. And what we want to do is try it. InduSoft has a bunch of configuration options for web settings. We're going to look at those in a minute, but for the most part, we could just take all the defaults. And what we want to do is just try to see if we can access our web pages. So I'm going to open up a web browser. And I'm going to browse to my local machine. And as you may know, every machine has a built-in loopback interface called localhost, which allows you to connect basically to your own machine. And I want to connect to my HTML file that I created. So because I published the project folder, I need to say go to the web folder and get the file called main.html. Okay. When you create and publish your project as a web page, it creates an HTML file for every one of your screens. And we can see that if we go and browse to our web application and go to the web folder, you can see that when we created our web page, it created a file, an HTML file called main. So what we want to do now is we want to try to browse to that. So there's my main file. So I'm going to hit Enter up here, and I'm going to get an error. Okay, so we're going to start the troubleshooting issues. Most error messages, if you actually take the time to go through them, are actually pretty helpful. And in this case, it's a 500 type error. A 500 type error basically means that I can't get to the website. Okay, there's two error classes that you'll find, 500 errors and 400 errors. 500 errors are basically I can't get to the website. 400 errors is I can get to the website, I just can't get what you're asking me to get, like main.html file. So in this case, it tells me that I have an issue because I cannot read the configuration file due to insufficient permissions. And it goes on to tell me that the configuration file is this guy, a file in my project folder called web.config. And if I scroll on down, there's actually a link here which will take me to view more information. It'll actually take me to a Microsoft Knowledge Base article which tells me what I can do about this. Okay, so it says, okay, you get these symptoms. There's a bunch of symptoms, different types of error messages. So what I need to go back to is go back and look at my error message. It's an error code 8007 0005. So if I find that error code, that's this one, so it's what they call error message 2. Requested page can't be accessed. And if I go a little bit further down, it tells me the cause of the issue for error message 2. And if I go a little bit further down, it tells me the resolution of the issue for error message 2. And basically the problem with this is that I don't have, or the website does not have sufficient privileges to access my project folder. Specifically, it says that I need to create read permissions for this thing called the IIS_I users group. So when IIS starts, it runs as a certain user. that user typically has very little permissions. And what you need to do is you need to give that user permission to your project folder, or in this case, permission to the web.config file in your project folder. So if we go to our project folder, we will see that there was a file called web.config, and we can actually see that it's called config if we turn on the file extensions. This is a file that the web server IIS actually created for me. And if we open this file in Notepad, just for your information, I'll show you what's in it so you'll know. It basically is all the different configuration things we made to the website. So in this case, it's the different MIME extensions that we created. And the website needs to be able to access this file. So we need to give this file permission. So we right-click on the file, click Properties, click the Security tab, edit the permissions for this file, and add the user called IIS, or the group called IIS users. Now, if we go back to the documentation, it states that the object I want to add is something called computer name IIS users. So you have to be very careful here. If you're on a machine that is also on a domain, okay, which I happen to be. Okay, the default location is the Windows domain you're on. So what you need to do is make sure you pick the Locations button. Give me a second here. And change the location to be your computer name. Okay? And then in the big white box down here, you want to put in the group that we want, IIS _ IUSRS, so users without an E. Why they couldn't add the E, I don't know, but just to make it confusing. And what it will do is it will add that object, that group, to the permissions for the web.config file. You don't need to do anything with the actual permissions. The default is read permissions, and that's great for what we're trying to do. So we apply this. We say OK. We say OK. We come back to our browser. We try to refresh the page. And I don't know if you can see it on the WebEx or not, but the little spinning logo next to localhost if I can highlight it here for you. You know, that guy is spinning. And it will spin endlessly because I have another error. So if you have users that try to start a client and it doesn't connect and it just seems to load and load and load forever, then you probably have another security problem that you need to go and fix. And that security problem is related to the web.config issue in that we have to give our project folder some more permissions. So I go back to my project folder, and in addition to the web.config, I actually need to give my whole folder permissions for that same user. So at the folder level, not just at the web.config level, we want to give the IIS user permission. Aye. So we'll give this user permission to my whole folder. not just the web.config. And we'll come back here and try one more time. We're going to stop it, and then we're going to try it again. Excuse me. And it's still going to spin because there's one more user we need to give a permission to, which is very hard to find in the Microsoft documentation, and that's a user called IUSR. So we're going to go back to our permissions one more time. We're going to right-click on the project, set the security one more time, and we're going to add one more user. And that is a user called IUSRS. Okay, or IUSR, not to be confused with the group called IIS_IUSRS. Okay, so one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when configuring IIS to support InduSoft is that these two users are not defined in their project or folder level security. The second most common reason is people don't create the MIME types. So, from a troubleshooting perspective, if you get errors like these, then the most common cause is security level or the MIME type isn't defined. And we'll actually go and delete a MIME type so we can see what that error looks like as well. But let's apply this one more time. Click OK. Click OK. Go back to InduSoft. Didn't mean to close the browser. So let me open a new browser. And try one more time, localhost/main.html. Give it a few seconds here. Oops. So we still got a spinning logo. I don't know if you can, someone just gave me a little hint. I didn't put the web folder in. Thank you, Jay. Okay, now that wasn't really the issue, but just so that you can see what's happening, let's start over. And put the right path in this time. So localhost web.main. And we're still spinning. Now, what do we do? Well, now we need to figure out sort of more under the covers about sort of what's going on right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a few more tools. One of those is called the Windows command prompt. And I'm going to open up a command. I'm going to run a command called telnet. And it's going to look like this. Telnet space the machine I want to connect to space the number of the port I want to connect to. So in this case, I want to connect to the local host on port 80. And that works, so that is good. So that means the web server is working. So our issue is somewhere else. One thing we might want to look at is netstat. Netstat is a command that shows you all the different network connections that you have open. And if you run netstat with a B and an A and an N option, you have to run netstat with elevated permissions. So we're going to start the command prompt with a run as administrator option. That's how you get the elevated permissions. And we're going to run netstat again. And what that's going to tell us, it's going to show us all the different network connections that we have open right now. Okay, I can see that we have a network connection open on port 80 for the web server. I can see I have other web connections opened up. So netstat's an option if you wanted to figure out, what's listening to what ports. You can also do a netstat and pipe that to something that looks like this, and that'll show you all of the port 80 connections we have open. Now, a lot of these are the WebEx connections that we have open, and some of these are connections that I have open to myself. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to IIS for a second, verify all my permissions, verify if these things are correct, my website is correct, verify my MIME types are correct. And then just for the heck of it, I'm going to restart everything. So IIS is taking a while to restart, so that tells me that I might have a problem with IIS itself. So we'll give it another second. I'm also going to go down here and close up my browser real quick. Okay, I finally got an error there. So I have issues with IIS at this point. IIS Manager has hung up. So what I can do is go back and even go down to a lower level interface and go actually to the Windows service. So I can go to the Control Panel, Administrative Tools, Windows Services. And Windows Services are all the different things that Windows runs in the background on my behalf. There's a bunch of different Windows services. There's called the World Wide Web Publishing Service. You notice it's stopping right now. So it's hung up for whatever reason. So what we want to do is we want to kill this. So I can try to right-click and stop, but it's already stopping, so that's not going to work. So what I can do is I can open up Task Manager. I can start Task Manager. I can click the Services tab. I could go back and find the World Wide Web Publishing Service. Notice it says stopped now, but down here it says stopping, so I'm not sure which to believe. So I'm going to go and click the World Wide Web Publishing Service again. See if we can't start it, but it can't because we can't get there. So when you get into a condition like this, where a Windows function doesn't start or stop, then this is a Windows issue, and in my case may actually require a reboot, which hopefully will not be the case because that would not be good. So let me try this one more time. Go back to Processes. So I can't launch the Task Manager, so you will have to bear with me for 1 second while I fix this. But you see some of the sorts of problems that people have using IIS and the web services. Now, this is one that I had not planned on to demonstrate to you, so I'm just not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So, okay, so we're trying to start it now. Maybe that's going to work better. It says it started. So let's go back and see if we can't launch the Internet Information Services Manager and see what it says. Okay, it shows that it started. So let's start our browser again and try to browse to that same page. And success, sort of. Okay, so a lot of the issues that our customers have are just getting IIS right. So, I mean, you can see the types of issues we had here. We had security issues. We had IIS got hung up for some reason. Fortunately, we were able to restart it. And once we were able to restart it, then it was able to serve up the web page. How do I know it was able to serve up the web page? Well, because I don't get a web error now. I get an IIS symbol error. So what's an IIS symbol error? If we look at the actual web page itself, by opening this in Notepad, then if you're familiar at all with HTML, you'll find there's not very much HTML in this web page. Okay? In fact, there's hardly any at all. The first thing this web page does, it creates an object. The object is called IIS symbol 1, and the object has a unique ID of 0AEE24 and so on. This is the ID of an ActiveX control. Every ActiveX control that you install on your machine has a unique ID. So whether it's a Adobe PDF viewer, a Flash viewer, a media player, every ActiveX control or every control that you load into your browser has a unique ID, and they all work about the same way. In the InduSoft case, we create an object, and we say we want an object with this ID. And the first thing that the browser does is it needs to go and try to find that object. Now, that object is found in the registry. If it finds the object in the registry, then it creates it and runs it. And I know that worked because I got an IIS symbol error. So the IIS symbol control started, but wasn't able to connect because it got an error 10061. If you get a big red X in the upper left corner, which we'll try to demonstrate here in a little bit as well, then that means the control did not start. And the control might not start for a number of different reasons. One reason might be that it didn't find it. Okay, so if it doesn't find the control in the registry, then this line right here called Codebase tells you where to go find it. So the browser will go to this website, download the file isymbolvm.cab, and install it, and then run it. So if you're ever interested in the mechanics of how InduSoft Web Thin Client works, it's very simple. We create a control, we give it the ID number, the browser looks in the registry for the ID number. If it finds it, great. If it doesn't, it downloads it, installs it, and then launches it. And again, we know it launched because we get the error. It says error connecting. Now, the 10061 is a generic Windows error. Okay, the two types of error messages you'll get here is 10061 or maybe 10060. If you go to Google and Google for that message, Okay, you will find it's because no connection can be made to the target machine, and the target machine actively refused it. Okay, what this means is we were able to connect to the machine that we were trying to connect to, but it said, no, I'm not going to let you. Okay, the other error message you may see is 10060, which is a connection timed out. Okay, the difference between connection timed out is that I tried to connect to the machine, but I never got as far as even getting to the machine. Okay, so 10060 would indicate a networking related issue, or maybe you just have an IP address wrong, where a 10061 means I probably have the networking correct, but I just can't connect. And the reason you probably just can't connect is because InduSoft isn't running. Okay, when you start InduSoft from the browser, as I showed in one of the pictures at the beginning, there's actually two connections being made, one to the web server for files and one to InduSoft for data traffic. Okay, so if the pipe open for data traffic is not open, then iAssemble can't run. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch my InduSoft project. And here's my InduSoft screen. So I'm going to use Alt-Tab to go back to my browser window. Refresh one more time on the browser window. And I get my project running inside a browser. Okay? Now, the other most common reason that people have issues is, for whatever reason, the iAssemble control doesn't work. I won't say doesn't work, that's the wrong term. Doesn't load, or it loads but can't connect. And there's two symptoms of that. One symptom is you get a big red X in the upper left corner of your browser. And I'm going to try to demonstrate that to you by opening up a remote desktop to another machine and use the other machine to connect to the machine where InduSoft is running. Okay, so now this is a remote desktop on another machine. I'm going to close it for a second because I don't know what my IP address is. If you don't know what your IP address is, one easy way to find that out is in the database spy. You could run the command called, or InduSoft function called get computer IP, and it will tell you what your IP address is. So my IP address is 10.168.23.42. So if I go back to the other machine and try to browse to the exact same location I browsed to before, except instead of localhost, I'm actually going to put the real IP address in there. Then notice I get this little picture icon in the upper left, and you might be able to see it, but the little spinning wheel next to my IP address is spinning. Okay, this is not a problem like it was before. What's happening right now is it launched the web page. It looked in the registry for my IP address, or not my IP address, the class ID of the control, and could not find it. And therefore, it went to the link that was in the web page and tried to download it. And I get this. Okay, so if you on a brand new machine and you try to connect to InduSoft and the iAssemble control is not installed, it's going to try to install it. So it's going to take, depending on the type of your connection on, maybe 10 to 30 seconds, maybe as much as a minute if you're on a real slow connection, but just have some patience, and you'll get something like this that says, hey, this website wants to install this control. And you'll say, okay, or click install, and it'll spin around for a little bit longer. As it tries to install. And it says, hey, do you want to really install this software? And we say install. Yeah, I really want to do it. and I get this little pop-up called the Thin Client Starter, which is the actual installer that runs. And again, it'll take a few minutes, and I get the dreaded red X. Okay, I can't tell you how many people call with the dreaded red X. And the dreaded red X, fortunately, is not that bad. Okay, the dreaded red X can happen for a number of different reasons. The root cause is that the control could not be loaded. Okay, but why? Usually it comes down to permissions. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that in our Internet options, we have sufficient permissions to download and run ActiveX controls. And if I go to the Security tab, and if I'm at medium, high, or lower, then I should be okay. Okay. But if someone has set a custom level and they've turned on or off different ActiveX controls, okay, so you see all the ActiveX controls here, then you want to go and make sure that these are turned on. And the easiest way to do that is just to pick one of the default controls. But you basically want to allow ActiveX. You want to allow scripting. You want to allow the download of controls. And notice that some of these have prompt, enable, and disable. So if you're not sure, don't enable it. Just use prompt instead. And that way you'll get a little pop-up like we did here before. But at the end of the day, this is not usually the problem, okay? Because most people have the default levels set. And if you don't, you could just pick the default level, okay, for any of these settings that you want, and it generally will work well. And that's usually not the cause. The cause is usually something called user account control or other Windows level security that is disallowing it. It might be a group policy that's not allowing it. And one way to get around that is to try to run in what we call compatibility mode. So this little broken link here called compatibility mode, sometimes also called protected mode. You can try. Again, in many cases, that's not going to be the issue. But sometimes it is. So try protected mode, and it's going to go through the same motions and try it again. And if we want to go through it, we can. But the most likely cause of this is what's known as user account control inside Windows that Windows introduced in Vista, Windows 7 and Windows 2008, and now I guess Windows 8. And it does not allow the browser to do what you want the browser to do. So we're going to let this finish, and then we're going to show you how to resolve that issue, because that's the most common issue for the red X. And sometimes you can resolve it easily, and sometimes you have to actually install it by downloading the client manually. So notice I got the red X again, so using protected mode didn't work. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close my browser, and I'm going to launch my browser with elevated permissions. So run as administrator. So I'm going to try to browse the same website again, and it should go through the same motions. Except the initial install should be faster because it's already cached, so we don't have to wait for that. But it's going to install it. It's going to ask me for install permissions again. We had a comment by one of our participants that what they do is when they get the little red X, they actually try to launch InduSoft in Firefox. Now, InduSoft won't actually launch in Firefox, but what this person suggests is if there is a security level error, Firefox will actually walk you through a series of dialogues to configure security such that the control will load, and that might help you as well. So that's an interesting idea. I'm actually trying that myself. So that's one input from our audience. But notice it still did not work, even with elevated permissions. Okay, this is not uncommon with Windows 7, Windows 8, and 2008. And unfortunately, there's not really an easy answer. The easiest answer is to install the control manually. Okay, and to install the control manually, the easiest way to do that, I'm going to go back to my InduSoft development machine. The easiest way to do that is to actually host the installer in your project. So if I go to InduSoft, and I go to where InduSoft is installed, and I have lots of versions installed, and I go to my InduSoft bin folder, there is a program called ThinClientSetup.exe. The ThinClientSetup.exe is the manual installer for the control. It basically is the same thing that the control tries to run under the covers when it pops up that command prompt. Okay? But this allows us to do it manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ThinClientSetup.exe and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go and stick it in my project folder. So I'm going to put it in the web folder. Okay? Why am I putting it in my web folder? Well, I'm putting it in my web folder because once this all works, and I already know users have access to my web folders because it's loading the HTML file, I'm going to use the same technique basically to allow them to download this control. So I go back to my other machine, and instead of running main.html, I'm just going to download the control, ThinClientSetup. If I could spell. And it says you want to run this or save it. I'll run it. Windows is being helpful. We're going to say, yeah, we really want to run it. I trust you. And it's basically going to run the same control or the same installer that the browser tried to run. But in this case, it's going to run it in an interactive mode. So we're going to click Next. It's going to install just like any other Windows app. Take our default settings and install it manually. Okay? It's the exact same thing the installer does when it installs through the browser. It's just being done interactively instead. So I'm going to close my browser to clear out any caches that might be in there and restart a new browser. In this case, I'm just going to restart in regular mode, not elevated mode. And I might want to have installed that as elevated mode too. Let's see what happens. Yep. Okay, I made a mistake. So let's try this one more time. And actually, while this is doing, I'm going to jump back. We'll talk about some other topics. I'm going to save this time instead of running it. Okay, so it's in my download folder. In this case, I'm going to right-click, run the installer as administrator. And we'll come back to this in a second. Let's talk about some other issues while that's going on. Okay, so the big red X is normally a permissions issue. It could be a Windows level security permissions issue. But by downloading it manually, that will usually resolve any issues. Now, let's look at some other things in InduSoft. Go to our project, settings. In your project settings, you have a bunch of web settings. In your web settings, we took all the defaults when we set this up the first time. But notice there's this thing called the data server IP address, the send period, all these little checkboxes. If you are running the web server on the same machine as InduSoft, and you're not running redundancy, and you're not running things like Web Tunneling Gateway, you're just running standard InduSoft, either using port forwarding or direct connections, you should always leave this field blank. Okay, that is contrary to our documentation in some areas. Some areas of the documentation say to put your IP address in here. Okay, do not do that. That causes more trouble than it does good. If you put your IP address in here, if I put in 10.168.23.42, then that'll work for now. But if I decide to move this project to another machine or download it to another machine, that other machine's not going to have this IP address, and it's not going to work anymore. Okay. What happens if you leave the data IP address blank is it will use the same IP address that you used when you did the browser session to InduSoft. So it'll pick up basically the address out of the browser bar. Okay. In this case, localhost or 10.168.23.42. Okay. So unless you have a redundant application or unless you're using Web Tunneling Gateway, or if your web server is on a machine for some case, leave this field blank. Okay, the other issues. Enable tooltips is always a good thing to do. Auto screen scaling. Okay, when I run the browser here, notice I get scroll bars. Okay, now I didn't actually put anything over here, but my project screen was bigger than my browser, so it scrolls. If I don't want that behavior, if I would rather have it auto-fit the browser size, and I could do this thing called auto screen scaling. So what that will do is that'll make the project fit the size of the browser, whatever size the browser is. If you want to enable a virtual keyboard, you can. We have some customers who run the thin client on flat panels that are on a wall, and people come up and touch on the panel. You might need a virtual keyboard. If you're using a traditional desktop or laptop, that's probably going to be more annoying than it's worth. The other thing you might want to look at is logging. If you're having issues, and you want to find out what's going on, then you can turn on logging, put in the name of some file here, and as long as the client application, the browser is running, it's going to log to your browser, or it's going to log to this file. Now, this file is going to get big quickly, so don't leave this running. Okay, just turn it on when you need to turn on some sort of debugging at the client level. On the Advanced tab, again, a secondary data server IP address. This is where, if you are using redundancy, put the other IP address in here. So then your web client knows if the primary goes down, it'll know how to get to the secondary. If the secondary has a different location, if it's not stored in the same URL path, then put in the secondary URL path in here. And then we have the ISsymbol URL. The ISsymbol URL is what gets stored in the HTML page if you can't find the web browser control. By default, it goes back to our website. Some people run in environments that are not connected to the internet. If you run an environment and your users don't have internet connection, they're not ever going to be able to get here. So you need to host the control yourself. And to do that, we do something very similar to what we did with the thin client setup. Is I open up Internet Explorer or a Windows browser, go to my program files, go to InduSoft Web Studio, go to the bin folder, and in the bin folder, you will find an ISsymbol VM.cab. So this is the exact same VM.cab that's on our website. If you want to host it instead, then just do what we did with the thin client setup. Copy that, paste it to your web folder, and then change the symbol path to be your web folder. Okay, you don't have to put a host name in front of it. You don't have to put an HTTP colon in front of it. You can use a relative path as long as the relative path is correct. So in our case, since the web server root or the web server path is our project folder, to get to the web folder, we have to add a /web. Okay. If you're using Web Tunneling Gateway, you want to enable it and then select any IP addresses that you're using. Again, if you just want to use the default, don't mess with these. Just turn on the Web Tunneling Gateway and then enable it, which I'll show you how to do in a minute. If you make any changes to the web settings, you need to rebuild all your web pages. Okay, you can either rebuild them manually by opening each screen and publishing them, or you can close your screens, and there's a link here called Save All as HTML. Or, if you've already created your web pages and you just want to update them, you can run what we call verify. And what verify does is it opens and closes all the different files looking for errors, as well as updating them with the latest settings. So if I run verify, that will also update all of my web pages. So now if I go to my web folder and open the file again in Notepad, instead of a link back to the InduSoft website, it's a link back to a relative path in my web folder. So now your users will be able to download this file whether or not they are on the an internet connection or not. Okay. One other comment I'm going to make about the web settings is there is an IP level security if you want to enable it. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to specify either individual IP addresses or individual IP address ranges for acceptable connections. So if I only want to accept connections from an IP address range from 10 then I can do that. And if anybody ever tries to connect outside of this range, then it'll be denied. Okay, so you might get an error, a permissions error. So I don't see a lot of people using this, but if you want to, it is there. A lot of people don't know it's there. I just wanted to point it out to you. Okay, but in general, if you just set it up right to begin with, or correct to begin with, set up your web server, set up the web server folder permissions, set up InduSoft, leave the data server IP address blank, set up your MIME types, then you generally don't have issues. Okay, let's look at a couple other examples of an issue. Let's go back to Internet Information Services for a second. And I'm going to break my MIME types to show you another, condition that you have or you might run into. So I'm going to open my MIME types, and I'm going to get rid of this wildcard. Okay, so now I only have APP and SCC files configured. I'm going to restart my website. And I'm going to go back and try to browse again. Oh, start my project. Go back to my browser. And I'm going to try to refresh the page. Now, notice it worked. Why did it work if my MIME types aren't set right? The MIME types don't apply on a local browser. They only apply on remote connections. All right, so let's go back and retry our remote connection one more time. See if this fixed our issue or not. If we still have issues, I'll bring up another client real quick and we'll look at that. But I'm going to close all these. I'm going to restart my web browser. Try to browse my web page. And Still missing a step. Oh, good. No, it worked. Okay, I was ahead of myself. All right, so I got an IS symbol control. Error connecting to the server. Sorry about that. I got disconnected, I think. Hopefully you all are connected. But I got an error connecting to server, and it told me that I could have got this error for 3 reasons. I'm either not allowed access because of that IP security, the max number of connections was exceeded, or it's just not accepting connections. Well, in my case, it's because the maximum number of connections was exceeded. If I look at my license inside InduSoft, and I can do that by going to Help Support, I'm only licensed for one web thin client connection. Okay, but I have a local one running, so I can't start a second one. So let me exit this one, go back to my remote desktop, refresh one more time, and it works. And it probably worked, and I'll have to go back and close and clear all my caches because the files it asked for were already cached. Okay, so I'll tell you what, we're going to finish the webinar, and we'll come back here and look at MIME types for anybody who might want to hang on longer. But I do want to talk about a few other topics. And those are the mobile access clients. Okay, and we have 2 of those. On the project tab, you have mobile access, you have mobile access tabular. Mobile access is where we can define a set of tiles and a set of widgets to display information about our tags and our alarms and trends and things like that. So when you open the mobile access configuration tool, you get something that looks like this. I'll see if I can't make it a little bit bigger. And by default, you get one top-level tile or domain we call main. And by default, it's going to show you any alarms that were configured. And then you need to give it a list of tags that you might want it to display. I don't have any tags yet, so I'm going to just pick a couple system tags, like second and hour or minute and second. So what you do is you define all the tags that you want to make available to your mobile users. You might give the tags a name if you want. And then you specify whether a tag is writable, whether or not you want them to be able to trend it. If you do want them to be able to trend it, you need to give it a min and a max. And then you need to tell us, okay, when we display it to the user, how do you want to display it? We have a circular gauge, a semicircular gauge, a horizontal gauge. We have a switch, so let me add one more object here. Let's grab a Boolean tag, call it beep, say that it's writable. We'll make it a switch. We'll go ahead and add a text value. We'll use a time tag, and we'll display that as a text box. So you define the tags you want, specify whether users allowed to change them, whether they can trend them or not. These 2 don't make sense for trending, so I'll turn that off. If you are trending, you can pick the color. And once you save this, then the mobile access graphics is set up. There's no other configuration that you need to do, okay? With the exception that when you installed InduSoft, it tries to install the mobile access client. If IIS is not configured when you install InduSoft, you're going to get a little pop-up that says, trying to install the mobile access client, IIS not configured, we're going to skip it. If that occurs, and you want to enable it later, you need to go to the bin folder of InduSoft. Run this program called the Mobile Access Setup, and that will configure the mobile access for you. Basically, the way the mobile access is configured is if we go back and look at our IIS, in our default website, in our case, it's not configured because I reinstalled this, so let's actually run that program. So let's go back out of here for a second and run the mobile access client. And what this will do is it'll install all things necessary for the mobile access. We're going to do a repair. Let's run as administrator. I was installed on that. We'll let this finish. And we'll do the, while that's going, let's go back and look at what we call the Studio Mobile Access. So Studio Mobile Access is a tabular version of Mobile Access. It uses a separate interface. If you want to enable it, then turn on Enable Mobile Access, and again, pick the tags that you want to display to the user. Hour, minute, second. If you want a label, you can add a label. You can specify whether they're writable or not. And this provides a pure textual interface. So we say OK, and there's no other configuration done for this. So while the other one is finishing, let's start a new browser and look at what this looks like. To run the mobile access client, we talk to ourselves. And the mobile access client is actually a subfolder of our web folder called the SMA, Studio Mobile Access. And the page we want to load is the logon.asp page. This uses ASP. And we'll get something like this. Now, if I had security enabled in my project, it would actually pop up a logon dialog where I'd have to log on. Otherwise, it just shows me the various process tags or any alarms that I might have configured in a very simple text interface. So if you could picture this on a flip phone, for example. It provides a very simple interface. I can turn on and off tags. I can change tags if I want to. Just very simply. Okay, so there's not a lot going on to there. A couple comments about monitoring. At the very bottom here for Studio Mobile Access, if you right-click and pick Sessions, it'll show you who's connected. So if any time you want to find out who's connected to my machine, that'll tell you. Also notice the little satellite-looking guy down here. It's the TCP/IP server that we enabled. If you right-click on that and pick Current Sessions, it'll show you what sessions I have connected. So you can see I have a web client session connected from my remote machine that I was using, as well as my local connection and an RPC client, which is an internal client. So if you want to know who's connected, you can do that. If you want to kick people off, you can kick people off and disconnect them. So you have all those tools at your disposal as well. So let's see if the installer finished. It says it thinks it did. We're going to say it did. And we are going to run the mobile access client by just opening up another browser. And in this case, the mobile access client always installs at a path called MA. Now, If you've gotten this far, then you know it works. Okay. We'll try to log in as guest. Notice the warning. I'm not going to talk a lot about SSL in this webinar. We do have a technical paper that you can download about how to configure SSL. But if you are concerned about traffic going across the wire, like maybe you're on a public internet, then you might want to enable SSL for your InduSoft applications. And it's not hard to do. Like I said, we have a technical white paper to do it. Take a look at that, and that has all the information for you. Okay, otherwise, once you launch it, you'll get this little thing called main. If you had, you could create other subfolders, and if you want to look at an example of it, I'll again point you at sort of the PC demo. It has a great example of this. But if I look on process values, then I get the same process values as I had before, like in the mobile access, the tabular client. But in this case, they're nice, pretty graphics. So if you can picture this on a tablet, whether it's an iPad tablet or an Android tablet, then you get the same look and feel. You can change the size of the icons if you want them bigger or smaller in that studio configuration option. And the mobile access tabular, not the tabular, and the mobile access configuration. There's lots of different options you can configure here. So if you don't like the circular gauge, you can pick a different gauge. Okay. On the global settings is where you can define your alarm settings. You can define the update rates. By default, it updates every minute. I'm sorry, every second, not every minute. So it's a great tool for users who are using tablets or smartphones and they're not Microsoft enabled, but you need to provide a graphic interface to them. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute and look and see what questions we might have on the chat. If you do have questions on the chat, then feel free to type them in. I have lots of comments on the chat about helping me with my errors. I appreciate all those. So there was a question here about seeing some trends in the runtime through the web. We can do that. Is there any tool that cannot manipulate in the web using this debugging? Is it possible to have the same screen in IE and tablet? Okay, so lots of good questions. So let's answer that one first. Is it possible to have the same screen in IE on a tablet or Android? The full function clients that we support, the web client and the secure viewer client, only run on Microsoft platforms. We do have the mobile access client, which we will be maturing over time to add more and more functionality, so it provides a similar experience to the web client. But today, you cannot do that. Now, having said that, we do have a blog post and a technical white paper about how you can actually configure terminal services or remote desktop to run InduSoft on an Android or an iOS tablet. And basically the way it works is you set up remote desktop on your Windows machine, you install a remote desktop client on your tablet, and you set it up in such a way so that when the tablet connects to the machine using RDP, it automatically launches the secure viewer. And what the user gets is it appears that the InduSoft full experience is running on the tablet, but it's not. In reality, remote desktop is running on the tablet, making a connection back to a server where it's truly running. Now, we have a lot of people using that, and a lot of people, like it. A lot of people use the mobile access graphics tablet because it's a much more simpler and clean interface. There is a technical note on how to set that up. As well. So if you go to our website and look at the technical notes and application notes, you'll find a technical note on how to configure InduSoft to support a full function client on Android or iOS type tablets. Another question, is there any other tool that cannot be manipulated in the web with this debugging? I'm not sure what that means. So Jonathan, if you could maybe expand on that question, I can answer it more. There's also a question about seeing trends on a graphical client. So we can absolutely do that. So let me just go to my project real quick. And just, again, real simply, I'm going to open up my main screen. I'm going to add a trend object to it. There it is. And I'm just going to use the same 3 tags, just so we can see something. Not very good at typing today. And save the screen. Now, like the web settings, if you change any screens, you need to republish them. So you can do a save all as HTML or just save that one screen as HTML, but make sure you republish it. If I restart my project, well, the project's already running. If I go back to my web browser, well, we'll let this go. It's probably simpler to do it locally, but we'll do it here. Let's go back here. Browser. Browser. Okay, one of the things you need to think about, and so my issue right now is I think I did everything right. So one more troubleshooting thing before we break is I created a screen, I put a trend on it, but it doesn't show up. Why not? Well, if you get issues like this, even if you know that you went and rebuilt the web pages, okay, do it as many times as you want. It is possible that the web server or the web browser is still going to be caching that page, and you're not going to get the latest copy. So if you're in a situation like that, then close your browser. To do it, fully, you might want to close all your browsers that you have open. Open a new browser. Go to your Internet options. Delete your temporary Internet files. If you want to do something even more dramatic than that, you can go to the Advanced tab and you can do your reset, which will reset your whole web experience. So if you want to do that, you can do that as well. And then try to rebrowse that web page. And you get the trend. So if you get it something like this, if you make a change to a screen and it doesn't show up, it's probably because of web browser caching. Just clear the cache, either using the big hammer by clicking reset or just delete your temporary Internet files, and you can get your updated screen. Okay, so that is something we find common in development environments. In production, people aren't changing things a lot, so we don't see it very much there. But in development environments, we occasionally get people calling about this as well. There's one more question, and that's about something called the NT Web Server. If you've worked with InduSoft or you've seen some of our other demos, you might have seen something called the NT Web Server. What is the NT Web Server? In the bin folder of InduSoft, there is something called the NT Web Server. The NT Web Server is a very simple web server that you can use in a test and development mode before you're ready to use Internet Information Services. Okay, so if you don't want to go through all the motions of configuring IIS, you just want to try out your application using the web interface. What you can do is you can copy the NT web server, like we've done with other stuff. Put it in your web folder. Or in your project folder, depending on what you want to do, and then launch it. Now, when it launches, it tries to open the web server port, okay? But in this case, you can see that it failed. Well, why did it fail? It failed because we already have IIS configured. So let's go stop IIS real quickly. And to do that, I'm just going to click on the host name, click stop, restart the NT web server, and now it's listening. Okay, so now I can open up a browser. I can browse to my machine. Now, in this case, I ran the NT web server in the web folder, so my root now is the web folder. So I no longer put the web in front. I just say localhost main.html, and it loads. But I'm getting a permission error because this guy's still connected. So let me just use it here. Disconnect from here. So disconnect this session. Refresh one more time. Let me just close that connection off. Let's get rid of him altogether. And what this allows me to do is basically run locally using, oh, you know what? It's my other web session somewhere. There it is. It's this one. Myself is talking to myself. Let me close this one. All right. And I can launch. Now notice it's not quite as fast as IIS. It's designed for test and development. Okay, but it can be used. All right, it does not support mobile access. It does not support the Studio mobile access. There are a few other things you'll find it doesn't support. It doesn't support a production workload. It's not for production. Okay, you should use it if you want to do a demo, a test, or some sort of evaluation of InduSoft. Feel free to use it. But if you're putting a production environment together, you need to use a real production web server. We do not support NT web server in production environments. So there was another question, if I have to install anything on my tablet or cell phone for this to work, and if you use the mobile access client, no. The mobile access client, either the graphical one or the tabular one, is pure HTML. There's nothing to install. You just browse to that website and you're good to go. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar. It went a bit longer than we had planned, but I think that's probably good because you got to see some extra troubleshooting that we had not planned, which is always a good thing. So if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to email us. You can email info@indusoft.com. If you have support-related questions after you've seen this and it didn't solve any issues that you might be having, feel free to email support@indusoft.com. If you don't know, we have a chat now on our website. If you go to our website, you can chat with us. There's a big screen, a big green rectangle that you can click and chat with us. Or you can call us. 1-800 or 1-877-InduSoft or 512-349-0334. So thank you for your time. Again, this will be posted to our website probably in a few days. And if you want to come back or if you want to invite your colleagues back, we're doing this again at 3 o'clock. And if anybody wants to see a Portuguese version, we're doing a Portuguese language version of this at 11 a.m. Central Time this morning as well. So thank you for your time. The webinar is ending now.